The mission is simple: to help high achievers naturally eliminate emotional and physical obstacles so they can optimize their life for higher achievement. Welcome. You have just entered the Genesis Zone.
Good day and welcome to the Genesis Zone show. This is Dr. Brian Brown. This is the second part of a two-part episode where we're exploring what the Genesis Zone advantage is, but more importantly, what it can do for you. In today's episode, I'll share with you the key to knowing with absolute certainty which parts of your body's natural hardwired responses can be altered to help you operate at higher levels of peak performance. Notice I didn't say high levels of peak performance, I said higher levels of peak performance. Because most of the people I deal with already operate at a very high level. We just want you to operate at the most optimized level you possibly can. Last week, I shared with you a proprietary method that I developed for cutting through the clutter of emotional and physical obstacles that are impeding your high performance so that you can know exactly which areas to focus on first. I shared my origin story about how I discovered the 5 zones of influence on your peak performance that help you stop chasing proverbial rabbits and get you out of the hamster wheel, so to speak, of guesswork that traditional medicine can leave you stuck in. If you didn't catch that last week's episode, I encourage you to go back and listen to it. It's chock full of valuable foundational information that leads into today's episode. So that brings us up to today. I want to share with you what the Genesis portion of the Genesis Zone really means. Now, at its root, if you look in Merriam-Webster's dictionary, Genesis literally means at the beginning or in the beginning. When I started looking at this and I developed the Genesis Zone as a concept, it dawned on me that in midstream medicine, and midstream medicine is what I'm calling everything that's not mainstream medicine. So it's all your complementary and alternative medicine approaches fit into this midstream medicine category. They're excellent. It's a wonderful way to reach optimization. But the problem that I found, because I transitioned from traditional practice into midstream medicine, was that all midstream medicine approaches touted or bragged about starting at the root cause. And the more I practiced in this field over, a 10-year period, the more it dawned on me, it's like, no, we're starting at a better place, from a better place than mainstream medicine is, but we're not necessarily getting to the root cause. And as technology was advancing over the past few years, nutrigenomics or genetics came into play, and it became more and more important in the functional medicine arena or in the midstream medicine arena. The problem is that it was an afterthought. It was like some clinicians were using it, some clinicians weren't. In fact, the mass majority of clinicians aren't using that. And I had this epiphany. Well, what if we started at the foundational level of genetics and moved forward from there? What would that do to treatment outcomes when it comes to clients trying to reach higher performance? Well, so I entered into an experiment with a small group of people. And I use the word experiment lightly because it really was techniques we were already using in midstream medicine. I was just using them first and letting that guide and direct everything that I do from there. What I found was this. I found that it saved people a tremendous amount of time and money. And here's how. Because when you start at the Genesis level, you start at the very beginning of when you were formed in your mother's womb, and those genes came together to make you who you are. When you start at that level, you're then able to lay a foundation for everything else to run more smoothly. In other words, when we understand the genetics, we understand who you are and how you're hardwired and how you function and what makes you tick internally at the cellular level. And it just makes more sense. If we brag about starting at the root cause, why wouldn't we start at the genetic level? And that's how the Genesis Zone was born. And that's where the word Genesis came from. In fact, the word gene comes from the word Genesis. It literally means beginning. So when I'm talking about your genes, which areas am I looking at initially? Because when you're talking about genomics in general, I mean, there's a plethora of information to look at. In fact, it's quite overwhelming. So that was the problem I was running into early on. It's like, okay, we can get genetic testing done, but then what do we do with all this data? Well, the challenge is that we needed to pare that back and make it a lot more simple for people to understand. Now, one of the most common mistakes that people make is they say, oh, I've already had 23andMe testing done, or whatever other company out there that does direct to consumer testing. That's fine and dandy if you like your information being sold on the open market, because there's plenty of data, there's plenty of information out there, especially with 23andMe, that it's kind of got their hands slapped by the public in that they were found out that they were selling for multi-million-dollar contracts. I'm talking nine figures and up. Contracts with pharmaceutical companies. They're selling your genetic information. So I encourage or discourage people from using companies like 23andMe and going through a midstream medicine professional that can get a medical grade test that's going to be total anonymity. It's going to respect your privacy. You're not going to have to worry about your information being sold. And it really condenses it down to where it's easy to understand. So I started working with the company, and we were fine tuning the protocols and panels for this genetic test. And I was like, okay, where do I start? If I'm looking at somebody that comes in that has primarily mood or anxiety issues, I need to check this. If I have a person that has low energy, I need to check this. If I have a person that has struggles with autoimmune conditions, I need to check this. And I'm like, well, why don't we check just a basic level panel, a genetic panel on everyone? And when I started doing that, I found that treatment time condensed from, say, 9 to 12 months, which it would take for some people to really turn the corner and feel exceptionally well. I mean, we would get results early on, but it would take a total of 9 to 12 months to really get that person feeling just super. And what I found was, when we start at the genetic level, we start getting results in as early as 4 to 6 weeks. And that was huge. So no longer did it take months to get those results. We were able to get those results in days or weeks. And just by simply addressing the genetic root causes, what I call the true root causes. So what do we check? Well, we want to check cellular metabolism, and I'll explain more of these in a minute. We want to check brain health genes, cellular metabolism genes, cellular energy genes, detoxification genes, and inflammation genes. And there may be some of you out there that didn't even know that we could check these genes. That's the whole point of me sharing this information with you, is because 23andMe doesn't go this deep. And in order to understand where a person is, you have to go this deep, because inflammation and detoxification affect neurological health. If you're that person with depression and anxiety, inflammation and detoxification or low cellular energy affect health in general if you're an autoimmune patient. So we have to look at everything. So when I talk about cellular metabolism, I'm specifically talking about how your body metabolizes through a methylation pathway. Now, let's go back to 23andMe, and I hate to keep beating up on 23andMe, but they are the big kid on the block, and they're the direct to consumer. And what you need to know is that when it comes to cellular metabolism, 23andMe literally checks one of the 5 phases within the methylation pathway. Now, you may be thinking, okay, well, that's better than none. Okay, well, I'll give you an example. So a client that I worked with over the past few years, when I started doing this genetic testing, had the 23andMe test done. According to the 23andMe test, this person only had like an 8% deficit in methylation. And I'll explain what methylation here is in just a moment. But they only had an 8% deficit in methylation. And when we got our testing back, that checks all 5 phases of the methylation pathway, this person was literally had a deficit of 86%. So they were starting their day with only 14% of their tank full. Now imagine trying to drive cross country and you've only got 14% of your tank full. It's not going to be long before you're pulling over to gas the car up because you're not going to get far down the road. Well, that was what was happening with this person. They couldn't, all their lab work checked out as quote unquote normal. That's a total nother story for another day. But the bottom line is, when we got this person's genetic results back, they had issues with inflammation, they had issues with detoxification, and they had major issues with cellular metabolism. Once we were able to get on top of that and get their cellular metabolism turned around, they excelled like any other. And that's just one of many stories that I hear over and over and over again. Once we check that cellular metabolism, we're able to get that corrected, and everything else just falls into place. Now, let me go back to methylation just a minute, and not trying to overdo it on cellular metabolism, but cellular metabolism is really important. Methylation is critical. Get this. It's for neurotransmitter production. So if you don't methylate well, you don't produce serotonin, norepinephrine, dopamine. Methylation is important for inflammation management. It's really important for detoxification. So even if you have perfect detoxification genes and you have perfect inflammation genes, if you have poor cellular metabolism, guess what? You have issues with inflammation and you have issues with detoxification. And even if you have perfect brain health genes or neuropsychiatric genes, and you have problems with cellular metabolism, your methylation's broken down, you're not going to produce the neurotransmitters. Even though the genes are perfect, you're just not going to produce those neurotransmitters. So it's not a one or approach. It's a both and approach. We need to look at all of these things, and that's why it's critically important to check these. And that's why it's critically important to start at the genetic level before we move anywhere else, because the genetic level really sets the tone for how you're going to respond in treatment everywhere else. When you're looking at peak performance management, wellness management, health management, and so on and so forth. So the next phase is brain health genes. It is what it is. It's neuropsychiatric genes, the genes that regulate your emotional balance, your neurotransmitter health. And sometimes we have people, for instance, that have genetics that certain foods will actually trigger them to be more anxious. You may have experienced that. You may have experienced when I eat a particular food or spice or something like that, I have a reaction and it makes me flushed. It makes my face red. It makes me a little more anxious. I notice that when I look at my watch, my heart rate is up. Those are reactions that sometimes we can see genetically. And there are many people who have these types of reactions or these types of genetic deficits. And the cool thing is that they're easy fixes. We'll talk about nutritionally supporting these genes here in just a moment. But brain health genes are critically important, because if I've got a person that struggles with bipolar disorder or depression, anxiety, chronic anxiety, I want to look at their brain health genes, that profile, and I want to see, okay, how is their brain hardwired from a genetic level to respond to stress, to handle mood, to handle attention, concentration, and focus. And we can look at that. It's not surprising that many of you listening to this who are entrepreneurs will find that when I do a genetic profile and I look specifically at the brain health genes, oftentimes I will find that entrepreneurs fall into this worrying warrior category. A worrying warrior just simply means that you have two specific genes that are both activated. One that makes you a more assertive. I dare use the word aggressive, but in a good positive way. It makes you more aggressive. It makes you more assertive. It makes you able to move the ball further down the field. And you have that warrior gene, but you also have that worrying gene where you might be stuck in kind of that ruminating thought pattern where you can't let things go. those things actually have some, with those two genes being cut on, have some advantages, but we can overcome some of those where we can dial down the agitation and irritability, because sometimes we'll see a worrying warrior that will snap everybody's head off. And that's not good for business in any stretch of the imagination. So being able to get that under control just by nutritionally supporting those genes to help them to function and express correctly is critical to just success and higher performance, peak performance, whether it's physical or emotional or in the job or whatever. So the next set of genes that we look at are cellular energy genes. These are 100% related to mitochondrial health. If you've ever had unexplained fatigue or low stamina or low endurance, you'll want to pay special attention to this class of genes, the cellular energy genes that focus on mitochondria. Again, we've got to look at the whole picture. So the mitochondria genes may be perfectly normal, methylation is horrible, or vice versa. Mitochondria genes are really, really bad, and methylation genes are perfect, if there is such a thing. I've never met anybody with 100% methylation, but you get the idea. We want to look at the whole picture, and we want to piece this together for this particular individual. It's probably the most individualized wellness care, peak performance care you're ever going to get when you start at the genetic level. But the third category is cellular energy. The fourth category is your detoxification genes. Now, this one is pretty self-explanatory. Everybody pretty much understands what I mean when I talk about detoxification, especially right here around the first of the year. Everybody's like, oh, I need to go on such and such detox protocol. Well, this is a little bit deeper than that. This is more at the cellular detoxification level, how your cells get rid of waste and toxic substances, how they eliminate them from the cell, how they eliminate them from the body. And it's very critical if we are looking at any type of issue, hang up, or challenge that's holding you back from peak performance, to look and see how your body detoxifies. And then look really and truly from an epigenetic standpoint, that's epigenetic standpoint, and look and see what other influences are coming in that may be affecting your detoxification. Like you may be subjecting yourself to certain foods or substances or lifestyle choices that are impeding your detoxification. And we need to take a look at that, but we start at the genetic level. And the next category is inflammatory genes. Now, at the risk of using a colloquialism, inflammation genetics is a very deep rabbit hole. I don't want to go down the deep rabbit hole here. Over time on the Genesis Zone show, we're going to be talking about inflammation. We're going to be talking about offshoots in that rabbit hole, so to speak. But it involves not just inflammation over the entire body, what I call general inflammation. It involves cellular inflammation. It involves gut inflammation. It involves neuropsychiatric inflammation. And yes, your nerves can be inflamed. And what we found actually over the past 10 years is that if a person struggles with chronic depression or anxiety or even bipolar disorder, we now understand there's an inflammatory component to the neurons in the brain that's going on to affect that. And when you tone down that inflammation, you can actually get a handle on symptom management. But inflammation genes also cover like allergen responses, how you respond to allergens, those things you're exposed to in your environment. And what type of histamine response that you have. Like this is totally random, but there's a condition called mast cell, M-A-S-T, cell activation syndrome, mast cell activation syndrome or disorder. And that particular person is hyper responsive in their histamine release. So they overproduce histamine. And there are different things. If we see that on a genetic profile, especially if that person presents with that history, then there are certain things that we can do to nutritionally support that gene so that it tones down. So that's a negative gene that's cut on, and we want to get it to cut off. We don't want it to overexpress and overproduce histamine. We want that to tone down. So there's some different things that we can do to accomplish that. The same thing goes for neuropsychiatric inflammation. There are things, supplements, and things that are very targeted, based on your genetic profile that we can prescribe that will bring neuroinflammation down. It'll bring general inflammation down. We've got supplements that will work separately for that, and supplements that'll work separately for cellular inflammation. That's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about nutritionally supporting your genes. Whether it be brain health genes or cellular metabolism genes or cellular energy or detoxification or inflammation, it doesn't matter. We can nutritionally support those with the right supplementation. It removes all the guesswork. If you look at the supplement industry right now, is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and it's one of the fastest growing industries in the world. And I think it's because people are looking for answers outside of mainstream medicine. The issue is that people end up taking supplements that they don't have any business taking. So when you are able to get a nutrigenomic profile like what we do, and we start at that foundational level, we can know beyond a shadow of a doubt exactly where your challenges are genetically, and we can know beyond a shadow of a doubt these are the supplements that you need in order to correct these problems. There's no guesswork. It removes all the guesswork, which is huge, 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 huge. So that wraps up all of the categories. We've got inflammation genes, we've got detoxification genes, we've got cellular energy genes, brain health genes, and then we've got cellular metabolism genes. So I just wanted to give you a nutshell overview of what is to come in the Genesis Zone show, and what we're going to be talking about when we're talking about how we use the Genesis Zone to help us achieve greater things, whether it be mentally or physically or in our job performance, our work performance. If you're an entrepreneur, that's hugely important. So recapping from last week's episode until this one, I've shared with you the 5 Genesis zones that will stop the mindless hamster wheel of guesswork that comes with mainstream medicine. And it'll stop the mindless hamster wheel of guesswork that comes with, okay, which supplement do I take? I think I've read about this one. I think it's good. Maybe I should take that. It takes the guesswork out of that. It takes the guesswork out of figuring out what's going on with me that's holding me back. It takes the guesswork out of figuring out where to start. So between last week and this week, I've also shared with you why your primary Genesis zone is the critical starting point. Remember, we talked last week about the questionnaire, the proprietary questionnaire that I created that helps us understand and rank order which ones of the zones you need to start with first, and how there was a disconnect in many cases where a person would present with one thing and you would think, okay, that's going to be in this particular zone. And when they went through the questionnaire, they were in a totally opposite zone, and how we were able to get targeted on focusing on that zone, that primary Genesis zone only. And then all of a sudden they started getting very rapid healing and like amazing results within a short period of time. So the next thing we hopefully you've learned over the past 2 weeks is how to unlock the true root causes of your wellness and peak performance challenges through genetic mapping. Genetic mapping is critical, guys, and in my mind, it's the only place to start. And lastly, we discussed how to unleash the power of nutritionally supporting your genes as the foundation for all of your health and wellness goals. So that wraps up this episode. And next week we're going to be going into our regular formatting. I told you in the very beginning 3 weeks ago I was going to do 3 talking head videos where I share with you what the Genesis Zone is. And hopefully I've been able to accomplish that. If this is your first time tuning in, please go back and listen to those first 2 videos. They'll explain a lot. And if you're listening on podcast, go back and listen to those first 2 podcast episodes. They will explain a lot of where we are today and why starting with genetics is critically important for everyone who's looking for higher achievement in their life. So in our Overcomers segment, in our regular programming that starts next week, I've got a very special guest lined up for you. She is going to share with us how she overcame challenges in her life and learn to prioritize self-care and connect with herself and others at a deeper level. You won't want to miss it. You're in for a treat. If you're interested in learning more about how to get into the Genesis Zone personally, how to understand what's going on with yourself at a genetic level so you can achieve higher levels of peak performance, send me a direct message. Someone from my team will be in touch with you. We'll get back with you, arrange a time to answer any questions that you have, or if we can't answer them right there in direct message. But be glad to answer any questions that you have. Open up a dialogue with us. Below this video, open up a dialogue with us, whatever you want to do. But reach out. Don't sit there on the fence wondering, is this right for me? We'll be glad to talk that over with you. So tune in next Thursday at noon Eastern Standard Time for more of this new launch into this regular programming. Most informed, most trusted, and most grateful you spent this time with us today. Until next time, stay in the zone. I'm Dr. Brian Brown.